And tributes are pouring in from left, right and centre for the demise of Dr. Manmohan Singh. Someone who worked with him is joining us live. Hardeep Singh Puri, Union Minister. Sir, thank you for speaking to NDTV. You were an IFS officer, a diplomat when Dr. Manmohan Singh was there at the centre of his power. As someone who worked with him, what are your memories of Dr. Manmohan Singh, particularly that he was seen as someone who staked it all for the civil nuclear deal with the US?
Thank you very much, Maria ji. In recalling the contribution of the late Dr. Manmohan Singh, I think what needs to be stressed is that behind his quiet demeanor was a very strong resolve. He came through as being very soft-spoken, and he also, I think, chose to express himself in soft terms. But when he had taken a decision after having convinced himself, I think he did not spare any effort in terms of resolute implementation. You mentioned the US-India civilian nuclear deal, and I think that is a case in point to illustrate this quality of his. I was then ambassador to the UN in Geneva. He stopped in Geneva overnight on his way back from the United States. It was clear almost from the minute the final phase of negotiations began that the deal would come in for a lot of criticism, both within the Congress party and from the left of center parties and indeed other political parties. But I think Dr. Singh was convinced that India's economic growth trajectory would require abundance of energy, and he was convinced that nuclear energy provided a possible solution to the energy problems of India. So when the opposition grew in momentum, he did not flinch. He chose to become even more determined, to the point that was reached that he was even willing to forsake the future of his government on that. And I think that strategy worked, and at the end the India-US bilateral civil nuclear energy deal went through. We also got an India-specific safeguard agreement from the IAEA. We also got something from the Australia Club on chemicals. So I think that sums up the personality. Normally, you know, in the political world, which I am part of, it is very easy for us to take positions determining based on which side of the political spectrum. Was he your leader or anybody? But I think that's a short-sighted approach. What may have happened in the past, what is important now is that the economic reforms that he set in motion, first as finance minister, then as prime minister, they laid the foundation for the substantive work which was done post 2014 to take the economy to the growth trajectory in which we are today. Equally, India-US civilian nuclear energy deal laid the foundations in a strong way for a bipartisan political, economic, people-to-people relationship between the two world's largest democracies. And I think if we are able today to look at the relations with the United States in a manner which is free from the baggage and the prism of the Cold War, I think Dr. Manmohan Singh's contribution in that will have to be recalled with a great degree of admiration.
And Mr. Puri, his manners were often understated, mild-mannered Sardar, as he was often called, with a great degree of quiet humility. He was also the first Prime Minister from the minority community, the Sikh community. As someone who comes from the same community, what do you think his role has been and the contribution to politics and the direction of policy of India?
Well, Maria ji, I will take you up on your words. When you describe Dr. Manmohan Singh as a mild-mannered personality, I think that mild mannerism is true. It's a characteristic. But behind that mild mannerism was also a very astute mind. He was an outstanding economist, a cerebral person, a deep thinker. And I think people make simplistic characterization that he was more an academic, more a civil servant, and less of an astute politician. I don't agree with that. I think the very fact that he moved seamlessly from a life in academia into very high-powered, high-voltage positions in the civil service. I mean, he was secretary in the Ministry of Finance, he was governor of the Reserve Bank, finance minister, and all those responsibilities he shouldered, being acutely conscious of the political realities around him. I mean, you could fault his style by saying, well, you know, sometimes when he faced adversity, maybe he didn't speak up, but that was his choice. If he wanted to get something done, he perhaps realized that his style of navigating forward was better when he could get a consensus. So I must say that history will record him with great degree of admiration, and I think his contribution, as far as his being a member of a minority community, the Sikh community, I think he was a very proud Sikh himself. He studied in a Khalsa school, he went to Punjab University, got his matriculation, and then went to the United Kingdom to first the University of Cambridge, where he got a tripos in the first class honours, and then to get a DPhil from Oxford. I mean, and he was a devout Sikh all along. And I think the community not only respected him, the Sikhs still respect him, and he was, in all respects, he brought a great dignity to the office, and he was identified, and all like, sober, well-meaning people, whether Sikhs or others, identify with this kind of mature approach.
Mr. Puri, he certainly would be seen as an ultimate outsider who made to the top of the political office. A technocrat, who went on to be the Prime Minister of India. First time it has happened in Indian political history. How do you look at this transition? And as someone who's also a diplomat yourself.
Well,
a former diplomat.
Well, Mariaji, I would, I have some difficulty with these characterizations of outsider and insider. I'm not sure. I think what you are perhaps implying is that Dr. Manmohan Singh did not deliberately thrust himself or seek office. Yes, I would agree with that. But that is also the sign of a very mature statesman. Sometimes we tend to forget that individuals make history. I'm using a Marxian, conceptology. Individuals don't make history in circumstances of their own choosing. The circumstances so produce. I mean, you had a situation in the Congress party, you had the late Shri Rajiv Gandhi, then you had Shri P.V. Narasimha Rao, you had other leaders, you had some other tall leaders like Shri Pranab Mukherjee. But at that point of time, the fact that he was chosen in preference to some others who had served the Congress party with great distinction as well, to be the Prime Minister, I think speaks volumes for how he positioned himself. And I would say that he never sought office, but it was a sheer, by dint of merit, the fact that he was chosen as first economic advisor in the Ministry of Trade, then chief economic advisor in the finance ministry, then as he went to the international arena, he was director of the money and finance division of UNCTAD, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, after that he was a well-paid international civil servant. He left that and he came back to India. Then again, when he was heading the South Commission along with Malimu Nairere, Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Secretary General. He chose to leave that to come back to India when his services were called. So he always answered that. So I think he's a very positive human being, understated, yes, as by contemporary standards of that time. Each age produces its own. There were more people with higher decibel levels around at that point. But his contribution is what will be recorded in history. And I think his services will be recalled with great admiration and affection.
And Mr. Puri, of course, you spoke elaborately about the civil nuclear deal. But, in the last 10 years, I mean, in his tenure as the Prime Minister from 2004 to 2014, he was also seen as giving direction to India's foreign policy, something that you see in terms of the tributes which are pouring in from across the world. World leaders have great things to talk about Dr. Manmohan Singh and their personal equations with him. Barack Obama has tweeted about the Titan who's clearly put India on fast track. So when you look at his overall policy, foreign policy contribution, of course, he is talked about as an economist whose brilliance, of course, was known by all. But as someone who shaped India's foreign policy besides the civil nuclear deal?
Well, I think the contribution of a prime minister between 2004 and 14 should not be measured just in terms of the India-US civilian nuclear deal, because the deal in itself has not resulted in any commercial exploitation. I think the importance of the civilian nuclear deal lies in the fact that it was anchored in and produced a qualitative transformation and positive orientation to the India-US bilateral relationship. But apart from that, I think the fact that Dr. Manmohan Singh's efforts in terms of the Look East policies provided the basis on which the present Prime Minister, the Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji, has developed an Act East policy, but also in other areas. I was ambassador to Brazil when he visited Brazil for the first time. This was the year 2006. And that was the beginnings of the friendship with President Lula. And India joined IBAS or IPSA, India, Brazil, South Africa, a 3 democracies partnership. We became a member of the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, which other countries like South Africa and others were added later. During the course of those 10 years, the interactions he had with different heads of state and government, the positive chemistry of that is now being reflected and it's pouring in. I just saw a tribute from the Malaysian Prime Minister, said that in his hour of darkness, he showed and extended kindness, which was not to be expected, what he was not expecting. But similarly, whether you are naming President Obama or the tributes which are coming in from other world leaders, these speak to the human qualities. And I think at this point of time, as the country mourns his loss, that is the sentiment on which I think we should remember the departed leader.
All right, Mr. Puri, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts.